Hello everyone, I'm Mike DeAngelo with That's Entertainment, and this is your video review of Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 by LucasArts. Star Wars The Force Unleashed was one of the space epic's most prolific video game releases of all time. It would have been ridiculous to believe that a sequel was not on its way, even considering the way that things panned out as the last story ended. Fans were drawn to the interim story between the trilogies, and most really enjoyed the character of Starkiller and his development. The Force Unleashed 2 has some huge shoes to fill, and the only way that LucasArts could make sure that happens is to improve on the original in almost every way, a feat that would make even the most successful developers a little nervous. So the most important question to consider is whether the game delivers, or if the developers were seduced by the dark side and merely cashed out. "7 months after the events of the first Force Unleashed, Starkiller, or a clone of him as Darth Vader indicates, is being honed towards the dark side, so that he can fulfill the purpose that he was groomed for, killing all the remaining Jedi. Dark memories haunt Starkiller, who recollects his love interest from the first game, Juno Eclipse. He hears voices that are indiscernible at first, and begins to question all he knows, instead focusing on the memories that might not even be his. In no time at all, his allegiance sways, and he is on the run from Darth Vader, off to save a Jedi instead of slaughtering him. On his way, he is beset by stormtroopers, TIE fighters, and dangerous mechs. The story is much weaker in comparison to the first game. The developers tried to lean heavily on some established franchise characters, like Boba Fett and Yoda, but that only takes the story so far. One of the more disappointing aspects of the game is how much of the original tale is shrugged off as this game takes place. You don't feel compelled to this version of Starkiller like you were in the original, which is a big shame. For the most part, the gameplay in The Force Unleashed 2 is where the title is strongest. With a variety of opponents of all sizes, there are plenty of dangers ready to put Starkiller down. Luckily, he has some enhanced abilities to help him along his way. With the mind trick, he can convince his enemies to fight each other, or send themselves careening out of a window. And he can also fall back on his fury, bolstering his attacks and making him more resilient to enemy opposition. The fighting is more fluid as well, thanks to more refined controls and a dual-wield scheme that Starkiller utilizes. This makes the action sequences seem quicker paced and less frustrating simultaneously. The Force Unleashed 2 also features a larger ratio of puzzles and boss fights than the previous game. Unfortunately, with some of these encounters you will begin to lose your temper, as some of the sequences just don't seem like they were designed well. Another aspect of the game that LucasArts should be proud of is its presentation. This game looks fantastic. Whether you're talking about the in-game models or cutscenes, the landscape or the character design, everything is aesthetically pleasing. There's a wide palette of colors that really stands out, and the textures are fairly impressive as well. Unfortunately, there's such a dearth of variety in locales that you feel kind of cheated by what could have been. Like the first game, levels go on for some time, and usually, later portions of a stage can look almost identical to the beginning. As with the previous game, the music and sound are spot on when it comes to a Star Wars title. When you hear TIE fighters roaring past, you almost can't suppress a grin. And the compositions, while nowhere near as competent as the originals by John Williams, do still feel familiar enough in this universe. The vocal work is once again top-notch as well. All the actors, from Vader to Starkiller, deliver their well-written lines, for the most part, without any dissatisfying results whatsoever. LucasArts did drop the ball here, unfortunately. While the previously noted elements of the game might make it seem as though this game would be worthy of some praise, as a complete package, The Force Unleashed 2 is sorely lacking. The game is ridiculously short, and it doesn't offer enough in the sense of new features to clearly get its point across. You're faced with the same hidden collectibles of the first title. Even the development of Starkiller feels somewhat overly familiar. While neither of those things are necessarily bad, they are scarcely actually hidden, even amongst this quickly finished game. Strangely enough, if you're going to get this game, you're probably best off getting it for the Nintendo Wii. At least there you can get some extra time for your money in the form of a multiplayer mode. With a game as acclaimed as The Force Unleashed, you'd figure the developers would work extra hard to maintain that level of care that allowed the original to reach such success. As it turns out, this sequel feels like LucasArts was racing through it, to reach whatever end was in sight, oblivious to the damage it leaves on this part of the series. It isn't a bad game, but compared to the first, you're bound to be somewhat disappointed. That's Entertainment awards Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 a score of 7 out of 10.